Section 7 of The Supernatural in Modern English Fiction by Dorothy Scarborough. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. Chapter 4, Part 2. The Wizard and the Witch. The demon has his earthly partners and evil members of the firm of Devil and Company. Certain persons that have made a pact with him are given a share in his power, and a portion of his dark mantle falls upon them. The sorcerer and the witch are ancient figures in literature, and like others of the supernatural kingdom, notably the devil, they have their origin in the East. The cuneiform writings of Chaldeans showing belief in witchcraft, and the witch of Endor, summoning the spirit of Samuel to confront Saul, is a very real figure in the Old Testament. The Greeks believed in witches, as did the Romans. Mero, a witch, is described in the Metamorphoses of Lucius Apuleius, from whom perhaps the witch Mero in Peele's Old Wives' Tale gets her name and character. In classical times, witches were thought to have power to turn men into beasts, tigers, monkeys, or asses. Some persons still believe that women have that power and might give authenticated instances. The sorcerer, or wizard, or warlock, or magician, as he is variously called, was a more common figure in early literature than in later, perhaps because, as in so many other cases, his profession has suffered a feminine invasion. The Anglo-Saxon word Wicca, meaning witch, is masculine, which may or may not mean that witchcraft was a manly art in those days, and the most famous medieval enchanter Merlin was a man, it should be noted. The sorcerer of primitive times has been gradually reduced in power, changing through the astrologer and alchemist of medieval and Gothic romance into the bacteriologist and biologist of recent fiction, where he works other wonders. In general, warlocks and wizards, while frequent enough in early literature and in modern folk tales, have become less numerous in later fiction. Scott has a medical magician with supernatural power of healing by means of an amulet, which, put to the nostrils of a person practically dead, revives him at once, but which loses its efficacy if given in exchange for money. Hawthorne has an old Indian sachem with wizard power, who has concocted the elixir of life. We see the passing of the ancient sorcerer into the scientific wonder-worker in such fiction as Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu stories that depict a Chinese terror, or in H.G. Wells' supernatural investigators in his various stories of science. The magician is not really dead in fiction, but is passed over into another form for the most part. We still have the hoodoo man of colored persuasion, and the red-skinned medicine man, together with oriental sorcerers from Kipling and others. Examples are in the House of Sudu by Kipling, where the wonder-worker unites a canny knowledge of the telephone and telegraph, along with his unholy art. Red Debts by Lumley Deacon, where the Indian magician exacts a terrible penalty for the wrong done to him, and where his diabolic appearance to claim his victim leaves one in doubt as to whether he has not sent his chief in his place. The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs, a curdling story of a magic curse given by an oriental sorcerer, by which the paw of a dead monkey grants 3 wishes that have a dreadful boomerang power. Black Magic by Jessie Adelaide Weston, who claims that all her supernatural stories are strictly true. The narrative of an old Indian sorcerer that changes himself into a hair mat and is shot for his pains. He has obtained power over the house by being given a hair from the mat by the uninitiated mistress. Hair, you must know, has great power of evil in the hands of witches and sorcerers, as is the case of the evil ones in the Talisman, who receive their thrall over the maidens by 1 hair from each head. F. Marion Crawford's Khaled is a story of magic art. Khaled is one of the genii converted by reading the Koran, who wishes to be a mortal man with a soul. He is given the right to do so if he can win the love of a certain woman. Hence he is born into the world like Adam, a full-grown man, to be magically clothed and equipped by the transformation of leaves and twigs into garments and armor, and the changing of a locust into an Arabian steed. After many supernatural adventures, he receives his soul from an angel. The soul at first, a crescent flame, immediately took shape and became the brighter image of Khaled himself, and when he had looked at it fixedly for a few minutes, the vision of himself had disappeared, and before he was aware, it had entered his own body and taken up its life with him. This is a parallel to the cases of ghostly doubles discussed in the previous chapter. The magician shows a disposition to adapt himself to contemporary conditions, and to change his personality with the times. Not so the witch. She is a permanent figure. She has appeared in the various forms of literature, in Elizabethan drama, in Gothic romance, in modern poetry, the novel and the short story, and is very much alive today. We have witches young and old. We have the fake witch, like the hoax ghost, the imputed witch, and the genuine article. We have witch stories melodramatic, romantic, tragic, comic, and satiric, showing the influence of the great creations of past poems, as Coleridge's Christabel, where the beauty and suggestiveness veil the sense of unearthly evil, or in Shelley's Witch of Atlas, where the woman appears as a symbol of alluring loveliness, possessing none of the hideous aspects seen in other weird women. The water enchantress in Shelley's fragment of an unfinished drama might be mentioned as another example, while Keats' La Belle Dame sans Merci has a magical charm all her own. Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market shows a peculiar aspect of magic, as also Mrs. Browning's The Lay of the Brown Rosary. On the contrary, Milton's Comus, Robert Herrick's The Hag, and James Hogg's The Witch of Fife illustrate the uglier aspects of enchantment. There are two definite types of witches seen in English fiction, the first being merely the reputed witch, the woman who is falsely accused or suspected of black arts, and who either is persecuted or else gains what she wishes by hints of her traffic in evil, like the old Granny Young in Mine Host and the Witch by James Blythe, who chants as a charm rune. A curse shall lay on water and land, for the thing denied the witch's hand, so that everybody is afraid to refuse her whatever she demands. This is a highly conventionalized type of the motif, and, though it is found in great numbers in modern fiction, is not particularly important. The principal complications of the plot are usually the same, the character known as the witch being either an appealing figure winning sympathy because of her beauty and youth, or else touching to pity because of her age and infirmities. No person of average age or pulchritude is ever accused of witchcraft in English fiction. She is always very old and poor, or young and lovely. Item also, she invariably has two lovers, in the latter case. She is merely a romantic peg on which to hang a story, not always real as a human being and not a real witch. In these stories, the only magic used is love, the fair maid having unintentionally charmed the heart of a villain, who, failing to win her, accuses her of witchcraft in order to frighten her into love. In some of the novels and stories, the victim is actually executed, while in others she is rescued by her noble lover at the 59th second. We have the pursuing villain, the distressed innocents, the chivalric lover disporting themselves in late Gothic fashion over many romances. Even Mary Johnston, with her knowledge of colonial times and her power to give atmosphere to the past, does not succeed in imparting the breath of life to her late novel of witchcraft, The Witch. These pink and white beauties, who speak in euphuistic sentences, who show a lamb-like defiance toward the dark tempters, who breathe prayers to heaven for protection and forgiveness to their enemies in one breath, who die or are rescued with equal grace and propriety. One is carried away from the scaffold by Kidd, the pirate, thus delaying for several chapters her rescue by her faithful lover. Do not really touch the heart any more than they interest the intellect, yet there are occasional instances of the imputed witch, who seems real despite her handicap of beauty and youth, as Iseult la Désireuse in Maurice Hewlett's Forest Lovers, whom Prosper Legay weds to save from the hangman. The young woman in F. Marion Crawford's Witch of Prague might be called a problematic witch, for while she does undoubtedly work magic, it is for the most part attributed to her powers of hypnotism, rather than to the black art itself. We find an excellent example of the reputed witch, who is a woman of real charm and individuality, in D'Annunzio's The Daughter of Jorio, where the young girl is beset by cruel dangers because of her charm and her lonely condition, and who rises to tragic heights of sacrifice to save her lover from death, choosing to be burned to death as a witch to save him from paying the penalty of murder. She actually convinces him, as well as the others, that she has bewitched him by unholy powers, that she has slain his father and made him believe that he himself did it to save her honor. And she goes to her death with a white fervor of courage, with no word of complaint, save one gentle rebuke to him that he should not revile her. The aged pseudo-witch is in the main more appealing than the young one, because more realistic. Yet there is no modern instance that is so touching as the poor old crone in The Witch of Edmonton, who is persecuted for being a witch, and who turns upon her tormentors with a speech that reminds us of Shylock's famous outcry, showing clearly how their suspicion and accusation have made her what she is. We see here a witch in the making, an innocent old woman who is harried by human beings till she makes a compact with the devil. Magmarilles is a problematic witch, a majestic Sibylline figure, very individual and human, yet with more than a suggestion of superhuman wisdom and power. Scott limned her with a loving hand, and Keats was so impressed with her personality that he wrote a poem concerning her. Elizabeth Enderfield, in Hardy's Under the Greenwood Tree, is a reputed witch, and witch pricking is also tried in his Return of the Native. Various experiments with magic are used in Hardy's work, as the instance of the woman's touching her withered arm to the neck of a man that has been hanged, consulting the conjurer concerning butter that won't come, and so forth. Old Aunt Keziah in Hawthorne's Septimius Felton might be called a problematic witch, as the woman in The Witch by Eden Phillpotts. She has a great number of cats, and something dreadful happens to anyone who injures one of them. She calls the 3 black toads her servants and goes through incantations over a snake skeleton, the carcass of a toad, and the mummy of a cat. Mother Tab may or may not be a bona fide witch, but she causes much trouble to those associated with her. The unquestioned witch, possessing indubitable powers of enchantment, occurs frequently and conveys a genuine thrill. Her attributes have been less conventionalized than those of her youthful companions, who are merely under the imputation of black art, and she possesses a diabolic individuality. Though she may not remain long in view, she is an impressive figure not soon forgotten. The old crone in Scott's The Two Drovers gives warning to Robin Oig. "Walk the diesel," as it is called, around him, tracing the propitiation which some think a reminiscence of druidical mythology, which is performed by walking 3 times round the one in danger, moving according to the course of the sun. In the midst of her incantation, the hag exclaims, "Blood on your hand, and it is English blood." True enough, before his journey's end, young Robin does murder his English companion. In the same story, other evidences of witchcraft are shown, as the directions for keeping away the evil influence from cattle by tying St. Mungo's knot on their tails. The subject of witchcraft greatly interested Hawthorne, for he introduces it in a number of instances. Young Goodman Brown shows the aspects of the diabolic union between the devil and his earthly companions, their unholy congregations in the forest, reports their sardonic conversations and suggestions of evil in others, and pictures the witches riding on broomsticks high in the heavens and working their magic spells. The young husband sees in that convocation all the persons whom he has most revered, his minister, his Sabbath school teacher, and even his young wife, so that all his afterlife is saddened by the thought of it. Witchcraft enters into The Scarlet Letter, Main Street, and Feathertop, and is mentioned in other stories. Old Mother Sheehy, in Kipling's The Courting of Dinah Shad, pronounces a malediction against Private Mulvaney and the girl he loves, prophesying that he will be reduced in rank instead of being promoted, will be a slave to drink, so that his young wife will take in washing for officers' wives, instead of herself being the wife of an officer, and that their only child will die, every bitter word of which comes true in after years. The old witch mother in Howard Pyle's The Evil Eye inspires her daughter to cast a spell over the man she loves, but who does not think of her, causing him to leave his betrothed and wed the witch daughter. When understanding comes to him, and with it loathing, the girl seeks to regain his love by following the counsel of an old magician, who gives her an image to be burnt. But that burning of the image kills her and looses the man from her spell. That incident is similar to that in D'Annunzio's Sogno d'un tramonto d'autunno, where the dogaressa seeks to slay her rival, both probably being based on the unforgettable employment of the theme in Rossetti's Sister Helen, where the young girl causes the death of her betrayer by melting the image. In Gordon Bottomley's play Riding to Lithend, 3 old women enter, who seem to partake of the nature of the Parcée, as well as of Shakespeare's weird sisters. They have bat-webbed fingers, the hound bays uncannily at their approach. They show supernatural knowledge of events, and they chant a wild prophecy of doom, then mysteriously disappear. Fate marches swiftly on as they foretell. The young and beautiful witch can work as much evil as the ancient crone, perhaps more, since her emotions are wilder and more unrestrained. She can project a curse that reaches its victim across the ocean, when the one who sent the curse is rotting in the tomb, as in the curse of the cashmere shawl, where a betrayed and deserted woman in India sends a rare shawl to her rival, then drowns herself. Months after, when the husband, forgetful of the source, lays the shawl around his wife's shoulders, the dead woman takes her place. After this gruesome transfer of personality, the wife, impelled by a terrible urge she cannot understand, drowns herself as the other has done months before. Oscar Wilde shows a young and lovely witch with a human longing for the love of the young man who throws away his soul for love of a mermaid. Through life's tragic satire, she is compelled, in spite of her entreaties, to show him how he may damn himself and win the other's affection. The jealousy shown here, and in other instances, is an illustration of the human nature of the witch, who, like the devil, makes a strong appeal to our sympathy in spite of the undoubted iniquity. The element of symbolism enters largely into the witch creations, even from the time of Shakespeare's three in Macbeth, who are terrible symbolic figures of the evil in man's soul. They appear as the visible embodiment of Macbeth's thoughts, and by their mysterious, suggestive utterances tempt him to put his unlawful dreams into action. They seem both cause and effect here, for though when they first appear to him his hands are innocent of blood, his heart is tainted with self-ambition, and their whispers of promise hurry on the deed. In Ancient Sorceries by Algernon Blackwood, the village is full of persons who at night, by the power of an ancestral curse, a heritage of subliminal memory, become witches, horrible cat creatures, unhuman, that dance the blasphemous dance of the devil's Sabbath. The story symbolizes the eternal curse that rests upon evil, the undying quality of thought and action that cannot cease when the body of the sinner has become dust, but reaches out into endless generations. In Old Fires and Profitable Goats by A.T. Quiller Couch, we see a witch, a young woman whose soul is under a spell from the devil. She gives rich gifts to the church, but her offerings turn into toads and vipers, defiling the sanctuary, and as she sings her wild songs, the bodies of drowned men come floating to the surface of the water and join in the words of her song. Her beauty is supernatural and accursed, yet her soul is innocent of wish to do evil, though it leaves her body and goes like a cresseted flame at night to follow the devil, while the body is powerless in sleep. Finally, the devil comes in the form of a Moor, possibly a suggestion from Zofloya, and summons her, when she dies, with a crucifix clasped over her heart. W.B. Yeats has pictured several witches for us, as the crone of the grey hawk in The Wisdom of the King, a woman tall with more than mortal height, with feathers of the grey hawk growing in her hair, who stoops over the royal cradle and whispers a strange thing to the child, as a result of which he grows up in a solitude of his own mystic thoughts with dreams that are like marching and countermarching of armies. When he realizes that the simple joys of life and love are not for him, he disappears, some say to make his home with the immortal demons, some say with the shadowy goddesses that haunt the midnight pools in the forest. In The Curse of the Fires and the Shadows, Yeats pictures another witch, tall and in a grey gown, who is standing in the river and washing the dead body of a man. As the troopers who have murdered the friars and burned down the church ride past, each man recognizes in the dead face his own face, just a moment before they all plunge over the abyss to death. There are witches in most collections of English folk tales. For the simpler people, the more elemental natures have a strong feeling for the twilight of nature and of life. The weird woman has power over the forces of nature and can evoke the wrath of the elements as of unholy powers against her enemies. Stories of witches, as of sorcerers, occur in Indian folk tales, as well as in those of American Indian, differing in details in the tribal collections, yet showing similar essential ideas. The Scotch show special predilection for the witch, since with their tense, stern natures they stand in awe of the darker powers, and of those that call them forth. They relate curious instances of the relations between the animal world and witchcraft, as in The Dark Nameless One by Fiona MacLeod, the story of a nun that falls in love with a seal and is forced to live forever in the sea, weaving her spells where the white foam froths, and knowing that her soul is lost. This is akin to the theme that Matthew Arnold uses, though with a different treatment, showing similarity to Hans Christian Andersen's tale of The Little Mermaid. The Kalak Ushka, or the Water Witch, and the Waiten Wara, the mermaid, and the Kelpie, the sea beast, are cursed with demonic spells and live forever in their witchery. When mortals forsake the earth and follow them, their children are beings that have no souls. The Irish folk tales, on the other hand, while having their quota of witches, do not think so much about them or take them quite so seriously, inclining more to the fairy forms of supernaturalism, suited to their poetic natures. The sense of beauty of the Irish is so vivid and their innate poetry so intense that they glimpse the loveliness of magic, and their enchanted beings are of beauty rather than of horror. We even have the humorous and the satiric witch, to correspond to similar representations of the ghost and the devil in modern fiction. The instance in Burns' Tam O'Shanter needs only to be recalled with the ludicrous description of the wild race at night to escape the dread powers. Bones, Sanders, and Another by Edgar Wallace introduces a witch with comic qualities, a woman whose husband has been a magician, and the reputed familiar of a devil. She cures people by laying her hands on them, once causing a bone that was choking a child to fly out with a cry terrible to hear, such as a cry a leopard makes when pursued by ghosts. When this witch with a sense of humor is arrested as a troublemaker by an army officer, she eradicates her clothes, causing very comic complications. The best example of the satiric witch is Hawthorne's Mother Rigby in Feathertop, who constructs a man from a broomstick and other materials for a scarecrow. In this satiric sermon upon the shams and hypocrisies of life, Mother Rigby, with her sardonic humor, her cynical comments, parodies society, holds the mirror up to human life, and shows more than one poor painted scarecrow, simulacrum of humanity masquerading as a man. The figure that she creates, with his yearnings and his pride, his horror when he realizes his own falsity and emptiness, is more human, more a man, than many a being we meet in literature or in life. Barry Payne has several witch stories that do not fall readily into any category, curious stories of scientific dream supernaturalism in the realm of the unreal. Exchange is the account of a supernatural woman, whether a witch or one of the fates, one does not know, who comes clad in scarlet rags to show human souls their destinies. She permits an exchange of fate, if one is willing to pay her price, which is in each case terrible enough. One young woman gives up her pictured future of life and love, and surrenders her mind for the purpose of saving her baby brother from his destined fate of suicide and manhood. The crone appears to an old woman that loves the child, who takes upon himself her fate of being turned into a bird, to be tortured after human death, so that the young girl may have his future. To be turned into a white lamb that dies after an hour, then be a soul set free. The Glass of Supreme Moments is another story of prophetic witchery, of revealed fate seen in supernatural dreams. A young man in his college study sees the fireplace turn into a silver stairway down which a lovely gray-robed woman comes to him. She shows him a mirror, the glass of supreme moments in which the highest instants of each man's life are shown. She says of it, "All the ecstasy of the world lies there, the supreme moments of each man's life. The scene, the spoken words, all lie there. Past and present and future, all lie there." She shows an emotion meter that measures the thrill of joy. After he has seen the climactic instants of his friends' lives, he asks to see his own, when she tells him his are here and now. She tells him that her name is Death, and that he will die if he kisses her. But he cries out, "I will die kissing you," and presently his mates return to find his body fallen dead across his table. There is something infinitely appealing about the character of the witch. She seems a creature of tragic loneliness, conscious of her own dark powers, yet conscious also of her exile from the good, and knowing that all the evil she evokes will somehow come back to her. That her curses will come home, as in the case of Witch Hazel, where the witch, by making a cake of hair to overcome her rival in love, brings on a tempest that kills her lover and drives her mad. Each evil act, each dark imagining seems to create a demon and turn him loose to harry humanity with unceasing force. As Matthew Maule's curse in The House of Seven Gables casts a spiritual shadow on the home. Yet the witch is sometimes a minister of good, as Mephistopheles says of himself, achieving the good where he meant evil. Sometimes typifying the mysterious Mother Nature, as the old witch Wittikin in Hauptmann's Sunken Bell, neither good nor evil, neither altogether human nor supernatural. Her strange symbolism is always impressive. End of Chapter 4, Part 2.